Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the County of Los Angeles Citizen Redistricting Commission, a special public meeting followed by the public hearing for communities of interest input. Today is September 22nd, 2021, and the time is 7:06 p.m. We will now call the special meeting and public hearing to order. I will now take the roll. As a reminder, commissioner names will be in a rotating alphabetical order by last name. Commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic and respond where your name is called. Kayla, I believe, can you go to the next slide?
Sorry.
Okay. Commissioner Brian Stetcher.
Present.
Commissioner John Bento.
Present.
Co-Chair Carolyn Williams.
Present.
Commissioner Dorina Wong.
Present.
Commissioner Jean Franklin.
Present.
Commissioner David Holtzman.
Present.
Commissioner Mary Kenny.
Present.
Co-Chair Daniel Maeda.
Present.
Commissioner Mark Mendoza.
Present.
Commissioner Apolonio Morales.
Present.
Commissioner Nelson Obregon.
Present.
Commissioner Priscilla Urbanella Segura.
Present.
Commissioner Haile Soto.
Present.
Commissioner Saira Soto.
Present.
Thank you. A special thank you to San Fernando Library and the staff for providing this space for the Los Angeles County Citizen Redistricting Commission to host this hybrid meeting. A few announcements before I hand it over to the co-chairs. Thank you again for everyone's patience with today's meeting. As typical of when we hold a meeting in a new space, we may be experiencing some technological issues, including some audio issues. We will monitor the commissioner's audio to make sure that they are audible. Again, thank you for being patient as we configure these settings. This is a hybrid meeting, so participants and commissioners are able to join virtually via Zoom or in person. For those attending in person, it is important to remember and to follow health safety protocols. Though Los Angeles County reopened with the rest of the state on June 15, 2021, changing conditions in the county due to the rapid spread of the Delta variant of COVID-19 has prompted new restrictions by the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health. Effective July 18, 2021, the County Department of Public Health released orders requiring that all persons, regardless of vaccination status, must wear masks or facial coverings at all indoor public settings. So for all those attending in person, for your safety and others, please be sure you are wearing a mask that covers your nose and mouth. Social distance from others outside of your household. Wash your hands often with soap and water or use hand sanitizer. If you test positive for COVID-19 or feel symptoms after the public hearing, please contact the clerk at tle@crc.lacounty.gov so we can let individuals who signed in know of their potential risks. If you test positive for COVID-19, please home quarantine for 10 days and inform any close contacts to quarantine for at least 10 days. Contact your doctor or healthcare provider for further direction. Continue to monitor symptoms for the remainder of the 14 days and seek medical attention if symptoms escalate, including difficulties breathing or keeping fluids down. Please remain in contact with the Department of Public Health. If you are feeling symptoms, immediately quarantine for 10 days and get tested at any public health test site immediately. Contact your doctor or healthcare provider for further direction and continue monitoring symptoms for the remainder of the 14 days. Seek further medical attention if your symptoms worsen, including trouble breathing and keeping fluids down. A patient is considered to be infectious from 2 days before the symptoms started until their isolated period ends. Asymptomatic individuals with a positive COVID-19 test are considered to be infectious from 2 days before their test was taken until 10 days after their test was taken. A close contact refers to individuals who were exposed to a confirmed COVID-19 case during the infectious period. This can include individuals who were within 6 feet of the infected individual for a total of 15 minutes or more within a 24-hour period, or an individual who had unprotected contact with the patient's body fluids or secretions, including being coughed or sneezed on, sharing utensils or saliva, or providing care without wearing appropriate protective equipment. As a reminder to the public, this public hearing is being recorded and live streamed to youtube.com/LA County Redistricting. The link to the recording will also be posted and accessible through the Los Angeles County Redistricting website. If at any time any members of the public have any technical difficulties, please message me, Tyler, and we can work towards fixing the issue. As a reminder for members of the public interested in making public comment for an agenda item, if you are attending in person, you may submit a speaker card. If you are attending virtually, you may submit in the Q&A your name, your affiliated organization, if any, and the agenda item you would like to make a public comment on. When you are called to make your public comment, you will be prompted to unmute your mic so you can speak. And you may turn on your video if you are comfortable. If you are participating via phone, press *9 to raise your hand. Once called upon, press *6 to unmute and speak. Each person will have one opportunity to speak for 2 minutes per discussion or agenda item. The co-chairs reserve the right to limit public comments to 1 minute per person or extend it to 3 minutes per person, depending on how many would like to speak. When you begin making your comment, please share your name and any affiliation you may have. Members of the public interested in making a public comment and who need an interpretation will be given double the allotted time for interpretation. Thank you. I will now turn the agenda over to Co-Chair Williams.
Thank you, Ty. We are at the approval of the agenda. There are no changes to the agenda, so the agenda is approved.
So, Co-Chair Williams, I believe your microphone is either not working or you need to speak a little bit closer to the mic itself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
That's better, even closer?
Is that better?
Much better.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I noticed a couple people on the Zoom nodding their head, thumbs up, this is better. Do you want to repeat that item for all to hear?
Okay, the agenda is approved. There are no changes. So we will move to presentation to the public regarding the redistricting process. And that will be done by Co-Chair Maeda and myself.
Nope. Hold on, I don't have the right one.
Thank you very much. We're anxious to hear your comments, members of the public gathered here as well as online. But before we do that, we're going to have a brief presentation about the redistricting process. This year, next slide, please. This year, there is a new approach to redistricting for LA County. Next slide. In the past, there's a committee, a boundary committee, formed by the Board of Supervisors to look at new census data and to suggest boundary changes in the districts. But the supervisors were free to reject those changes and adopt their own map. This year, for the very first time, there's a Citizens Redistricting Commission comprised of 14 citizens in the county, reasonably reflective of the county's diversity, who are going to do that task. And we are completely independent of the Board of Supervisors. In fact, we've adopted bylaws providing that we are not to have any contact with any of the supervisors, their staffs, their families, or their agents. Next slide, please.
Oops.
We have adopted values to guide our task this year. And you'll see those on the slide ahead of you. They include values of accountability, transparency, objectivity, integrity, and inclusion and equity. You can find the full recitation of our values and this slide at our website at redistricting.lacounty.gov. Next slide, please. Now I want to talk a little bit about the significance, the diversity, and the size of Los Angeles County and how that affects our task. Next slide. Redistricting happens every 10 years. Every 10 years is a new census that counts all the people in the United States, and that data is provided so that we can figure out where people live, and each district, each political district has to have roughly the same number of people. So the census data is available now. The state is doing redistricting for congressional seats, state senate and state assembly seats. I know the LA City is doing redistricting for LA City Council, and our task is limited to the 5 districts for the Board of Supervisors in LA County. Next slide. Redistricting is important because each supervisor in the county has an enormous amount of power. There's a lot of resources that each supervisor can bring to bear, as well as different kinds of facilities and services that are provided in each supervisorial district. That includes fire and policing services through the sheriff, and unincorporated areas of the county are governed by or have the sheriff and the fire department provide services to them, and even some incorporated cities contract for those services through the county. So who your representative is within your district is very important, plays an important role in your life. Next slide. The Los Angeles County is the most populous county in the United States, about 10 million people. A full quarter of the entire population of California resides right here in LA County. It's the 3rd largest metropolitan economy in the world. The county is comprised of 88 cities and over 100 unincorporated areas. And as we all know, it's one of the most ethnically diverse U.S. counties. Next slide. Here you'll see the current 5 supervisorial districts, and the areas in pink are unincorporated areas. The areas in white are incorporated. That means they're basically cities. You'll notice right away that District 5 is much, much larger than all of the other districts, especially including, for instance, District 1 or District 2 in the center of the city. Why is that? District 5 is comprised primarily or largely of rural areas where it's a lot less densely populated. So you need a lot more land mass in order to accumulate the 2 million people per district. Whereas District 2 is quite densely populated. So that area, although it's small, represents about 2 million people as well. We are tasked with drawing the 5 supervisorial districts. We cannot draw more than 5 or less than 5. That would require a change of the law by the voters. Next slide. Then we're going to turn to a redistricting overview, and for this I will turn it now over to Co-Chair Williams.
Thank you, Co-Chair Maeda. There are 5 criteria that we look at in terms of drawing the lines for the supervisorial districts. The first one is we want to make sure each district is relatively equal in size. There are 10 million people in the county of Los Angeles. That means approximately 2 million people each. Second, we want to make sure we comply with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And that means the Voting Rights Act prohibits racial discrimination in voting. The third one, we want to make sure that all of the districts are within the district is geographically continuous. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that, contiguous. Number 4, we want to make sure that the geographical integrity of communities of interest, cities, and local neighborhoods are kept intact, which means they are kept in the same district to the extent possible. And number 5, we want to make sure, as much as possible, we work toward geographic compactness. Next slide, please. I will spend a little time just going through each of the criteria. The first one, again, as Co-Chair Maeda has said, the census counts people every 10 years. It is based, what is redistricting is basically where we redraw the lines every 10 years to make sure all of the, for LA County, all of the districts are relatively equal, and that means approximately 2 million people each. Next slide. The Voting Rights Act basically looks at, again, prohibiting voting based on racial and ethnic, based on race and ethnicity. Basically, what we're looking at is giving these groups a fair shot, which means giving them a chance to elect a candidate of their choice and a candidate that can understand and respond to their needs and the needs of that district. Next slide, please. Here's an example of how a district can be drawn, or how districts can be drawn that take away the minority voting rights. Here we have what is basically 4 equal districts. They have the same number of people in each district, but what has happened to the minority voting rights? Basically, in this example, they've been diluted. Even though there's an equal number of people of color in each district, the question we ask, based on the Voting Rights Act, is there a way to draw districts that can give minorities a chance to maximize their voting rights? So let's look at another example of how we can do redistricting. The Voting Rights Act may require drawing what we call a majority-minority district if a minority group is geographically compact, politically cohesive, and large enough to be a majority within a district. So what this example shows is how we can, based upon the Voting Rights Act, we can draw a district that allows communities of color to elect a candidate of their choice. Again, the size of each district is relatively equal. What we have done in the center is create what we called a majority-minority district. The central district is basically 75% minority voters. It does meet the criteria that we mentioned earlier. It's large enough to be a majority-minority district. It is geographically compact. It is politically cohesive and geographically contiguous, which means it's geographically connected. Next slide, please. In this example, we're talking about what we call geographic contiguity. And basically, the question is, are they connected geographically? In the first example here, we have what we call a contiguous district. If you look at the second district, it is not geographically connected. You'll see there's some space between the pieces. What our criteria says is that when we draw these districts, they have to be connected. Next slide. When we talk about preserving geographic integrity of cities, neighborhoods, and communities, what we're looking at is minimizing the division of a city, a local community, or local community of interest. And again, what we're doing here is getting input from you, which helps us understand what those communities of interest are. And our goal is to, as much as possible, make sure they are in the same district. A community of interest is a contiguous population connected that shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. Again, we're looking about providing an opportunity for those in that district to have someone who represents their interests and can also be responsive to it. Communities of interest shall not include relationships with political parties. It's not about a political party. It's not about the incumbent or political candidates. It's all about the communities of interest, and again, you help us define those. Next slide, please. Basically, what we're talking about, has to do with compact. Again, we do not bypass nearby populations to draw districts. If you look at the first example, it's compact. The second example is what we call contorted. That's not our goal. And definitely in the third example, it's a dispersed population. We want to make it as compact as possible. And as you've seen in the map of the 5 supervisorial districts, for the most part, that criteria has been met. And it is our goal to make sure we meet that criteria. Next slide. Here we're looking at what we call gerrymandering and how basically it's something we want to avoid. Historically, districts have been drawn in ways that excluded minority communities by limiting their ability to vote for the candidate of their choice. In this example, we're looking at basically equal precincts, 60% yellow, 40% green. In a gerrymandered district, in the middle example, yellow always wins. In the third example, green always wins. If you look at how the lines are drawn in that third example, definitely an example of gerrymandering. We want to avoid political favoritism, and where you draw the lines matters. Let's look at the next example. Here we're looking at drawing lines that avoid the gerrymandering. This is what we call fair. It's proportionate. If, again, you look at the 50 precincts, 60% are yellow, 40% are green. In the middle example, the districts are proportionate. You get 60% yellow and 2% green. Okay, thank you. In the third example, again, is proportionate to the electorate in those districts. It's 60%, 3 districts or 60% are yellow, and 2 of the districts are green. Again, proportionality. Next slide. So here's the question, what can you do? And there are many ways you can get involved. We've had 12 community of interest public hearings. We've made an effort, and actually we have held hearings in each of the 5 supervisorial districts. In August and later on, you'll be able to submit redistricting maps. There will be training for that. Actually, not just training, but we'll make available software to you. In September, right now, the commission is starting to review your input on the communities of interest. Right now, there are people who are submitting maps. You will be able to submit maps now and through October. Our role in October is to take your input and create some maps and provide. We'll have November where there'll be public hearings for you to provide input on the maps that we've drawn. And then our goal is by December 15th to submit our final maps for the 5 supervisorial districts of LA County. Next slide. Here's where we've done what we call our hybrid meetings, where you have an opportunity to participate in public, or you have an opportunity to participate virtually. This is where we've done 5 of them, one in each supervisorial district. This is our 4th of the 5, and we have one more that will be held in Bellflower coming up a week from today. But again, our interest is to get your input before we draw the maps and to make sure we're considering that when we move to our duties. Next slide. When we ask you to support us and help us, we're not saying you have to do this on your own. We have toolkits to support you, to help you spread the word. They're in what we call 12 threshold languages. They're listed there from Armenian, Chinese, Cambodian, Farsi, Korean, Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Hindi, Japanese, Thai, and Russian. It includes fact sheets, presentations. You can also, we have a Facebook page, and always join our email. It's our mailing list at redistricting.lacounty.gov. Next slide. And again, stay informed. These are our 14 commissioners who were independently chosen. Again, we are an independent commission, the first for LA County. Next slide. And this is our support staff, whom we know we would not be able to do this. Our executive director, Gayla Harsal, our CRC clerk, Ty Lee. We have subject matter experts, Carlos Dialba. Our consultants, Priti Mather with ArcBridge, and additional consultants are listed. And we also want to make sure we do a shout out to our independent counsels, Holly Watley, Alex Giragosian, and Pamela Graham. So I think that's it. Next slide. Thank you so much. That's our overview of the redistricting process.
So the next agenda item, co-chairs, would be the actual public hearing, public testimony. And we have a number of speakers in the room. And I believe our historic practice has been to have the speakers in the room speak first, followed by the individuals on Zoom. We also have a number of these speakers are from the organization of Sherla, and Karen Diaz has offered to help with the translation because some of the testimony will be in Spanish. I'd like to defer to the co-chairs how much time we would like to allow for the public testimony.
I think for this, we would like to allow 2 minutes each, where there's interpretation that goes to 4 minutes, up to 4 minutes.
Okay, so we have 7 individuals. The first one is Raquel, is it pronounced Setz? Katz. Welcome. You get to stand to the podium. Please stand close to the microphone so the people on Zoom can hear you as well. And I'm going to encourage all of the individuals who are speaking. One of the things that's very important for the commissioners is really to understand the geographic boundaries of the areas you're talking about so we can make sure we understand where your community of interest is located. So if you're ready, Tylee is ready with the timer.
Alrighty, so I'll be touching on the areas of Northridge and North Hollywood. So good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Raquel Gomez, and I am a Sherla member, a DACA beneficiary, and a daughter of immigrants. Today, I offer you 2 communities of interest, Northridge, which I lived around the area for 5 years, and now I reside in the city of North Hollywood. The first community of interest is Northridge, with common cities such as Granada Hills, North Hills, Reseda, Lake Balboa, Canoga Park, Pacoima, and Chatsworth. Northridge's population is made up of poor working class and middle class individuals, such as young professionals and some whom work in a variety of different industries. Around the area exist people who have resided here for years, such as homeowners and people who own properties, while on the other hand, there's also people in Northridge who live in apartments or condo complexes that hold up to 5 to 6 people in a single household. During the 4 years that I lived in Northridge, I was attending as an undergraduate at Cal State Northridge and was able to see the rapid changes and lack of access to resources such as legal care, childcare, youth, and adult recreational and developmental activities. Many of the population I interacted with were low-income community members, given that many of them worked at fast food on campus as contracted workers, custodians, and tram workers, as well as food street vendors. It's located around the freeways of the 118, 405, 210, the 27, and the 101. And then the second community of interest is in North Hollywood, around the intersections of Laurel Canyon and Lancashire. And I have lived here for about a year, and so the population in North Hollywood includes Caucasian, Latinx, Black, Asian, Native American, and Hawaiian population. And so we ask that these populations receive renter relief, jobs, have access to affordable homes. And so in the end, I just hope that political representatives invest more dollars and we offer more in-language services in order to empower these communities and to provide them with the necessary resources in order for them to stay afloat within their districts. So thank you, commissioners, for the time.
Thank you.
And let me add, a number of the people have submitted public comments. You're welcome at any time to fill out the form on the computer and submit it where you have more time to add more specifics, and we'll read them all. Thank you. The next speaker is Gennaro Reyes.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Gennaro Reyes. I am a child of immigrants and a member of Sherla. Today, I offer you 2 communities of interest. I lived for 22 years in West Athens, and for the past 4 years, I have lived and attended university in San Fernando Valley. Today, I'm going to speak for my community of Northridge and West Athens. The first community of interest is in South Central, with cities like West Athens, Huntington Park, Inglewood, Hawthorne, and Compton. These places share jobs in laborious and low-wage facilities like food and customer service, which do not encourage generational wealth. They lack the education and resources needed to exit the cycle of working classdom. My community in West Athens is located on Century and South Vermont, surrounded by the 101, the 110, and the 405 freeways. To move around in my community, we have the Metro, Dash, and Gardena buses, as well as the Green Line. West Athens has resources like Memorial Hospital of Gardena and University of South Los Angeles and Southwest College. However, West Athens lacks in resources such as clinics and healthcare, childcare, and job academies. The second community of interest is in San Fernando Valley, which includes Northridge, North Hills, Reseda, Pacoima, and Van Nuys. Northridge is made up of working class and lower middle class people. Here, apartments with 1 to 2 bedrooms that house families of 4, 5, or 6 members are often seen. Other housing units may include rentals, mobile homes, studios, townhomes, and small single-family homes not affordable to working class members. These communities enjoy high educational institutions, but lack the resources and access to jobs that could improve the communities as a whole. They often work in construction, grocery stores, gardening, and food preparation, or customer service. My community in Northridge is located between Nordhoff and Reseda, surrounded by the 118, 405, and the 101, I can use the Dash and Metro buses, as well as the Orange and Red lines to travel. CSUN has the highest number of commuter populations that will travel down to Reseda to catch the Orange and Red lines. I was one of those students, and it would take me around 6 hours of travel. I'm not alone in this. Many of the low-income students commuted to CSUN because they could not afford to live at CSUN. Resources here include the Northridge Public Library, as well as the...
Time is up.
Thank you.
May I ask a quick follow-up? You spoke of two... Hi, I'm over here, Commissioner Holtzman. You spoke of 2 communities of interest. One was the Northridge area, but I didn't catch what you called the second one. You were speaking very quickly.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, so the second community of interest is San Fernando Valley.
Well, just the San Fernando Valley as a whole.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. The first one was South Central.
Oh, South Central, and then Northridge area of the
South
San
Central,
Fernando
West
Valley.
Athens, and then San Fernando Valley. Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, Genaro, if you have it written, we'd be more than happy to enter your written comments if you're comfortable doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I realize you couldn't cover everything. Carolina? And Carolina, do you want to provide your last name as well?
Moran.
Okay.
Mi nombre es Carolina Moran. Buenas tardes, comisionados. Me llamo Carolina y soy miembro de la Coalición de los Derechos Humanos de Chirla. Hoy vengo a hablar por mi comunidad inmigrante del Valle de San Fernando en Canoga Park, de la que he sido parte por los últimos 16 años. El vecindario está ubicado en el Parque Lana, que sería al norte de la comunidad, hasta Canoga Park High School, que es al sur. Las autopistas principales son 101 y 118, las calles principales Topanga Canyon y Chapman Way. Es un área residencial. El tipo de vivienda en mi comunidad, hay muchos apartamentos y ahí viven familias, dos familias en unos solos apartamentos. Pero también hay muchos terrenos en mi comunidad vacía. Mi comunidad es similar a los siguientes barrios de North Hollywood, Winnetka, Reseda, Van Nuys, Alira, Pacoima y Panorama City. Yo he trabajado en estas ciudades y veo que hay mucha gente pobre y trabajadora. También he visto que no hay recursos de salud médica, al igual que en mi comunidad. Mi comunidad es diferente a las ciudades de Calabazas, Highland Hills, Malibu, Westwood, West Hollywood y Encino. En estas comunidades sí tienen acceso a recursos como nosotros no tenemos para la educación temprana, y ellos sí tienen fondos para la educación de muy alta calidad. La mayoría de las personas que viven aquí son latinas, familias mixtas y un poco anglosajonas. El lenguaje es español y en mi comunidad, pero también hay comunidades hindúes que hablan hindi. Las personas que viven en mi comunidad son gente pobre y de clase trabajadora. El tipo de trabajo que hacen los miembros de la comunidad es limpiar casas, los jornaleros del campo, construcción, plomeros, electricistas, cocineros en restaurantes y ayudantes de meseros, y ser empleados de supermercados. Muchos también trabajan en Costco, Home Depot, Lowe's y fábricas de empleadores como de champú, cremas. Esos son los empleadores más grandes de mi comunidad. El tipo de servicios que hay disponibles en mi comunidad son parques como el Arna y la biblioteca en Canoga Park. También hay clínicas comunitarias, pero no atiendan a las personas indocumentadas. Entonces la comunidad inmigrante tiene que ir a clínicas y hospitales fuera de Canoga en la comunidad. No hay una organización sin fines de lucro localmente como es Sherla. La más cercana está en Pacoima o en el downtown. Los problemas grandes de mi comunidad inmigrante son, primero, la falta de vivienda accesible. Necesitamos un representante que se enfoque en darle prioridad a nuestros recursos y a la comunidad sin hogar. Acceso.
If I may, Karen, make sure you have time to do the translation. There's only a minute left.
Good afternoon. My name is Carolina Moran, and I'm a member of Sherla. I lived in Canoga Park for the past 16 years. My neighborhood is located between Leonard Park, that's north of the community, and to the south is Canoga High School. The main freeways are the 101, the 118, the main streets are Topanga Boulevard and Sherman Way. My community is similar to North Hollywood, Winnetka, Reseda, Arleta, Pacoima, and Panorama City. I have worked in all the cities that are working class and poor. I have also know that they have lack medical resources. This community is very different from more affluent communities in Calabasas, Hidden Hills, Malibu, Westwood, West Hollywood, Encino, and Topanga Canyon. Most of the people that live here are Latinos and mixed status families. People who live in these communities are poor. They work cleaning houses as day laborers, farm workers, construction workers, plumbers, and electricians. The biggest problem in the community is the lack of affordable housing, the fact that public servants like police do not help and protect our immigrant families, the access to medical care for immigrant families, and access to public education. For the past 20 years, I have march down the streets of Van Nuys Boulevard and Glen Oaks and Laurel Canyon every Thanksgiving for laborers, right? I have also knocked on doors, and I know that the redistricting gives me an opportunity to have a voice because I'm an immigrant that can't vote. I work to get out the vote in every single election since 2004. To conclude, it's important that you keep my immigrant communities together, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Karen.
And,
You know what, I'm going to hand out my calling card to everyone so you can email the written comments as well. The next up is Margarita Mendoza.
I do hope to be able to read that at my leisure, what we just heard.
Buenas tardes, comisionados. Mi nombre es Margarita Mendoza y soy miembro de la Coalición por los Derechos Humanos de la Inmigración, Sherla. Hoy voy a hablar por mi comunidad de San Fernando, de la cual he sido residente desde 1972.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Margarita Mendoza, and I'm a Sherla member. I'm speaking for my community in San Fernando, which I've been a part since 1972. The neighborhood is located between Silmar in the south, and Pacoima in the north. The main streets are the 5, the 405, the 118, and the 210. Other main streets are Brand Boulevard, McKay Avenue, San Fernando, and Mission Boulevard. The city of San Fernando is primarily a residential area. The type of homes in my community are single-family homes that were built in the 2030s that are normally 2 bedrooms. There are also some apartments, but they're not large buildings. My neighborhood is a mix of multi-generational household and some young people that are just starting their families. Most of the people that live here are Spanish-speaking Latinos, but there are also some Armenians, African Americans, and Asians. The people who live in my community are working class people, essential workers. The type of work that my community members do is construction, such as plumbers, electricians, gardeners, cook, and waiters in restaurants and supermarket employees. My community is similar to the neighborhoods in North Hollywood, Winnetka, Reseda, Van Nuys, Arleta, Pacoima, and Panorama City. My community is very different from cities in Calabasas, Malibu, and Santa Monica. In these communities, they have different priorities, and their concerns do not include COVID relief, environmental justice, and access to quality public education and immigration. My community was very heavily attacked by COVID. Including myself, I was intubated back in April of 2020, and although I managed to recover, not everyone was so lucky. Our Sherla community lost a great friend and leader, Tony Bernabé, from COVID. My neighbor that I spoke to, who had fallen ill from COVID, died 2 weeks after contracting the disease. That's why it's very important that my community has a county supervisor who understands the needs of immigrant communities and prioritizes COVID relief. Another problem in my community is the lack of affordable housing. We need a representative who focuses and prioritizes on the resources for homeless communities. They need access to mental care and affordable housing. Another thing that concerns my community is environmental justice. There's a lot of pollution in the communities, and I have been evoking and volunteering with the tree people. We've been cleaning houses, picking up trash, and planting trees. We need a community leader who will help beautify our community and keep the air clean. We also care about access to higher education for immigrant families. There are many young people who are undocumented, and some have DACA and don't know that the county has problems for financial aid and help with renewal DACA legal fees. San Fernando has been my home for the past 50 years, and I care deeply about this community. This past December, I donated over 100 tamales to a local hospital for essential workers. In closing, commissioners, I would like my immigrant community to be kept together by having North Hollywood, Winnetka, Reseda, Van Nuys, Arleta, and Pacoima, Panorama cities together in one neighborhood. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you. Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you.
The next up is Sherla Rodriguez.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Sherla Rodriguez, and I am a member of Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, Sherla. I have lived in San Fernando Valley ever since I moved here 8 years ago. My community is bounded by the Los Angeles Forest in the north, North Hills in the west, and Sun Valley in the east. The main freeways connecting these cities are the 118, the 405, the 210, the 170, and the 5. The main streets used by my community are Van Nuys Boulevard, Lauren Canyon Boulevard, Glen Oaks, and San Fernando Road. San Fernando is home to a population of 1.8 million residents, of which 40% are Latinos, many of them being immigrants. Other predominant races are African American, Asian, and white. My community is made up of poor working class and lower middle class. The languages most commonly spoken are Spanish and English. We work in construction, landscaping, plastic production factories, food packaging companies, and street vendors. The community here lives in apartments, mobile homes, small homes, garages, and condos. It's typical to see families of up to 8 people living in one small apartment or home. Due to the rise in rent, many families have been displaced from their homes. We also lack access to affordable healthcare, especially for the immigrant community. In San Fernando, we have organizations like MEN and El Nido who provide services, but they can't service the entire community. One example is my mother, who has diabetes and has to pay $150 per visit to the doctor to afford her medication and her doctor visit. The San Fernando Valley also has a problem with policing. I have witnessed my father and uncle get racially profiled as well. I ask that you keep Sylmar, Pacoima, San Fernando, North Hills, Van Nuys, Panorama, Reseda, Canoga Park, North Hollywood, and Sun Valley in one supervisory district. My community of San Fernando is incredibly different from communities in Calabasas, Malibu, Woodland Hills, Porter Ranch, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, and West Hollywood. These cities house wealthy residents and do not prioritize creating long-term solutions that address affordable housing. Those regions have access to resources such as healthcare and higher education, which we lack due to difference in property taxes that fund our schools and public services. We also need representation that not only comes from the community, but has lived experiences here in San Fernando and is responsive to our needs. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ireli Hernandez.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you for your service. My name is Ireli Hernandez, and I'm a member of Sherla, also a proud resident of the San Fernando Valley. Although I'm an immigrant, I consider the San Fernando Valley home for more than 2 decades. And today I come to speak to you as the Valley, as a community of interest overall. Our regions, Canoga Park, Winnetka, Reseda, Lake Balboa, Van Nuys, Panorama City, Sun Valley, Arleta, Pacoima, and San Fernando and Sylmar, these are all bounded together. On the west, in Canoga Park, on the east, Sun Valley, in the north, Sylmar, we are all one common community. And the freeways that are around us are the 101, 405, and 5. Our common streets that connect us, Parthenia, Roscoe, Sherman Way, and Victory Boulevard, all have one connection in common, that we are common communities. Other main streets are Balboa, Van Nuys, Canoga Avenues, DeSoto, and Laurel Canyon. The valley is so diverse. There's 1.8 million residents here, and much of the residential area is families. There's also many commercial areas. But what many of these communities have in common, such as Canoga Park, Reseda, or Van Nuys, is that the families living and working here are working families. And in these areas, there is so much diversity. The Valley is one of the most diverse sites, one of the most diverse communities in the United States, just as like the school that resides in it, CSUN, is as well. We have immigrants from all over the world here in the Valley. One example is I grew up also in Canoga Park, near Lanark Park, where we saw many, many different communities coming together. Of these communities, we were all low-income or working-class communities. Many of these families were in the service sectors, grocery clerks, housing, housekeeping. And so to this end, I tell you that these communities, we all have something in common together, and not much in common with other affluent communities like Agora Hills, Bell Canyon, Calabasas, Encino, or Woodland Hills. It's in the best interest of the Valley as a community as a whole to remain together, and that's why we call it home. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you.
We have Rosa Zuniga. She's participating via Zoom. She would like to speak in Spanish, and then I'm going to be turning it over to Ty, because that is the end of my speaker cards in this room. So Ty, there's a Rosa Zuniga who would like to speak.
I do not see Rosa currently in the room. I do see that they have submitted in the Q&A. If someone could read their testimony, because they currently do not have much battery. But they are currently not in the Zoom room.
Okay, so let me ask Karen Diaz, who I believe is the key contact. You're going to follow up, and maybe we proceed with some other speakers, Karen, if that's okay. Oh, we can definitely take another speaker. You have her testimony there? Okay, we're going to have a person in the room give Rosa Zuniga's testimony. And again, it seems like they have very organized comments in writing, so please email them to me so the commissioners can read them leisurely and make sure they capture all your great points. So you are speaking on behalf of Rosa Zuniga.
Correct. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Rosa Zuniga. I'm an immigrant and a member of the Humane Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, CHIDLA. Today, I will talk about my community in the San Fernando Valley, where I have lived for the past 11 years. My community is located between the hospitals of Olive View as part of the north and finishes in the city of Van Nuys. The main streets that my community are connected are Hubbard Boulevard, San Fernando Boulevard, Truman, Glen Oaks, Laurel Canyon, and the Foothill. The main interstates are the 118, the 405, the 5, and then the 210. In my community, there are a lot of Hispanic, Chicanos, and we are also starting to see people from the Middle East. We speak in Spanish and in English. The people that live around my community are of lower class and working class, as well as middle class. We live in apartments and houses, condos, and we often see a lot of families living in one home, from grandfathers to daughters to sons and nephews, and even grandchildren. Here in my community, we do a lot of handiwork. We work in the plastic company like Pepsi. We clean houses. We also do a lot of gardening. The San Fernando Valley has some clinics and then various parks, but the parks that we do have are for older people, and at the Cesar Chavez Park, they have a community class like swimming. El Nido is an organization that my community has that services children and families. In my community, we have the Community College of Los Angeles Mission for the students that are finishing high school. They can also go to the high school in San Fernando. We need a lot of street cleaning, we need dental services, we need vision services, especially ones that cater to lower class families. We need more libraries because right now the only ones that we have are in Silmar and in San Fernando. I would like our communities in Silmar, Arleta, Pacoima, Sun Valley, and Van Nuys to please keep them together so that we can continue protecting our communities and have our representatives represent us. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And with that, I believe we've concluded the speaker cards in this room. I defer to Ty.
We have a couple of folks lined up that have signed up through the Communities of Interest form. I just want to take this moment to also remind the members of the public who are Zooming in and who are interested in making a public comment for Communities of Interest to please fill out the Community of Interest form, which you will find in the chat. If you are having a difficult time finding in the chat, you can also find it on the Redistricting website on the homepage. With that, the first person on our list is Tony Castro, but I believe Tony is currently not in the Zoom room. I do want to remind members of the public, if you do sign up, be sure that your Zoom name reflects your name that you submitted to the Communities of Interest form. Tony, if you are currently here, please let me know. So then we'll go ahead and move on to Kim Lamari. So Kim, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself. And if you are comfortable, you may share your video. Once you begin speaking, you will have 2 minutes to make your public comment.
Good evening, honorable commissioners. We will be submitting detailed comments in writing. My name is Kim Lamari, and I'm president of the Las Virgenes Homeowners Federation. We are the oldest and largest umbrella organization of neighborhoods and communities in the western Santa Monica Mountains that span and include unincorporated county and the Las Virgenes Malibu COG. We strongly advocate that our longstanding COI remain together in the same supervisorial district. We have been representing mountain coastal communities and thousands of stakeholders united in common and shared interests for more than 50 years. We have a rich shared history that unequivocally binds us, including preservation and conservation land use policies in this geographical contiguous area, which comprises the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area and its soon to be expanded extension, the Rim of the Valley Corridor. It is essential to clarify the unincorporated county portion. The simplest way to look at this is to understand that it is divided into only 2 major land use policy areas, the Santa Monica Mountains Local Coastal Program that encompasses 52,000 acres and the adjacent North Area Plan, which encompasses 22,000 acres. These 2 governing land use policy documents are administered and implemented and enforced by LA County Department of Regional Planning and are intentionally aligned. The LCP and the NAP encompass our rural communities of Malibu Lake, Cornell, Topanga, Montanido, Triunfo, Lobo Canyon, Cold Creek, Seminole Springs, Lakeside. A single community like Topanga, for example, is governed in portion by the LCP and the remainder by the NAP. Thus, it is absolutely essential that the LCP and the NAP remain intact. Connectivity is key in the Santa Monica Mountains and just as important for people and communities as it is for the wildlife. It is best described by the National Park Service as the largest urban national park in the country. It comprises a seamless network of local, state, and federal parks interwoven with private lands and communities. The land use policies of these cities and county are similarly focused on resource protective policies first and environmental stewardship. Sorry, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
A quick follow-up, if you're still there.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Hi. I think I read a letter from you that was submitted in written form. I think you mentioned there's 5 cities in your association.
Yes, that is the Las Virgenes Malibu COG, and then there's unincorporated county. And we form, yes, but you didn't get a letter from me yet specifically. I'm going to submit it by the 30th. It'll be very detailed.
Okay, someone else from the
yes,
from
it was
Las Virgenes.
likely. Yes.
Are all the cities connected?
Yes, sir.
As one piece?
Yes, we're all connected as one piece, and it is around and adjacent to the unincorporated Santa Monica Mountains, which is comprised of the LCP in the north area, and it's administered it's unincorporated. So all of those.
I think the commission would appreciate it if you would send us a map showing those areas.
I absolutely will do that. Yes, I will do that. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Stuart Waldman. Stuart, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself, and if you are comfortable, you may share your video. Once you begin speaking, you will have 2 minutes to make your public comment.
Good evening. My name is Stuart Waldman. I am representing the San Fernando Valley Redistricting Coalition, made up of neighborhood councils, residents associations, chambers of commerce, business groups. Our goal is that the San Fernando Valley should have one district instead of being cut up. I agree with a lot of the previous speakers that spoke about the San Fernando Valley being very diverse and being put into a district with West Hollywood and Malibu. We don't belong in a district like that. In those districts, we get dominated by other interests. In fact, the San Fernando Valley has never had a representative from LA County, a supervisor in the Los Angeles basin. So it is time to change that. The San Fernando Valley is 1.8 million people. As was mentioned earlier, it is 41% Hispanic. It would be a majority minority district if it were its own district. In fact, the LA City Redistricting Commission on Monday one of their priorities was to not put a district that goes south of Mulholland. They drew a line in the sand that no district that represents the San Fernando Valley go south of Mulholland. And I would urge this commission to do the same. We believe that the Valley should be kept in one district. We have, with 1.8 million people, we make up, I believe, 93% of what a district would be. We have shared interests from heat to traffic to water that unite us. And there's more that unites us than divides us. So again, I would urge you to keep the San Fernando Valley in its own district. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Obregon, I believe you have your hand up.
Yes, Mr. Waldman. I'm wondering what you consider the San Fernando Valley, what is considered. How far do you consider like areas of Burbank? And then how far up the up and over the mountains towards the LA basin, towards West Hollywood, trying to get a better idea of what is considered the San Fernando Valley. Also like the Chatsworth area, I might add to it. I hope you made sense of that.
Yeah, so the San Fernando Valley is bounded by the Santa Susana Mountains to the north and to the west, Mulholland Drive to the south, and the San Gabriel Mountains to the east. So we see Mulholland as being the border. And in fact, most entities that have the valley as a region consider that. Most nonprofits and most governmental agencies consider that as well. We consider that the valley, and so does Cal State Northridge. They've got a report coming out in the next week, their geography department, and it considers the valley going from Calabasas to Glendale, and then up to the north as well. So, you know, the valley is easy. We're just surrounded by mountains. Any other?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And thank you all for your hard work. I know this isn't easy.
Thank you. So I believe we don't have any more in the communities of interest form, so we'll go ahead and move to the Q&A. Sorry, Commissioner Holtzman, did you have your hand up?
I did. If Mr. Waldman's still there, are they still there, Mr. Waldman?
I can bring him back if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. There you are. Mr. Waldman, I know I read something where you were talking to, I think, the State Commission, writing to the State Commission, or I'm not sure exactly the context, but I read where you were saying you would like the districts that other commissioner was drawing to be at least 50% composed of residents of the valley. In my notes, I wrote 50% or bust. You said there's 1.8 million in the valley. That would suggest to me that we could possibly draw a majority Valley district plus another district that was almost majority Valley. And I wanted to ask you how you would feel about that.
I think the first choice would be to have a San Fernando Valley only district, just to have adequate representation, which we have just never had. But you're right, and that actually wasn't my talking points, but I ran out of time. So our goal is to have a wholly contained district in the Valley, but if you must go outside the Valley, that the Valley be the majority portion of that district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm here all night. Any other questions?
Actually, we need to constrain the amount of time per speaker.
All right, thank you. So next, so we currently have no other signed up through the communities of interest form, so we'll move to the Q&A. So next we have Chris Rowe. So Chris, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself. If you are comfortable, you may share your video. Once you begin speaking, you will have 2 minutes to make your public comment.
Hi, this is Chris Rowe. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I want to speak to all the people. I heard you all. I live in West Hills. I live just west, 1 mile west of Canoga Park High. So the people that spoke about Canoga Park High and Lanark Park, this has been my area that I've lived in for 43 years. But I also know what it's like to be a working class person, because in my 20s, I worked at Northridge Hospital, and I worked at Tarzana Hospital, and I've worked at West Hills Hospital. And so I understand healthcare needs. I'm very familiar with one of the problems that we have, for example, is the LA County is divided into spas. And the other day I was looking at where would a resident of Canoga Park, for example, go if they needed health care? And they have to go all the way to somewhere like Pacoima or something for a clinic. So that's why we need a valley-bound, just a complete San Fernando Valley district, number one. But number two, I would like to correct Mr. Waldman. The mountains to the west are not the Santa Susana Mountains. Those are the Simi Hills. The Santa Susana Mountains are to the north. The Santa Monica Mountains are to the south. I'm familiar with Ms. Lamari as well, and the work that she does for her community. I agree that we should be inclusive in the valley, that Calabasas is drawn on maps that I've seen as a part of what is considered to be a 2 million census of the valley in maps that I've written for City Watch. And I would like to bring services more west that these people are talking about. I am a CSUN graduate as well, and a Pierce College graduate. And I just want to say, finally, I know what it's like to live in a garage apartment, a granny flat in the valley in my 20s. So I know what it's like to be poor. So,
time is up.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Very much.
So I believe we have no additional participants from the communities of interest forum, nor in the Q&A, nor any who have their hands up that are calling in. Co-chairs, how would you like to proceed?
I suggest we suspend the public hearing for now until we take care of some commission business. Then before we adjourn, we'll come back and see if anyone has indicated that they want to speak in the public hearing portion. So what is the next agenda item then?
So it's an executive report. I'm opening it up. I'm going to have 2 parts to cover. Let me get to them. Whoops. Okay. So So when I met with the commission last week, we talked about the importance of synthesizing the rich input from the public in terms of communities of interest. The next order of business is really to figure out how you're going to go about synthesizing the maps that are being submitted so you can look at them in a thoughtful way. What we would like you to consider is the establishment of an ad hoc working group or subcommittee to review the maps submitted, organize them for the commission consideration, and or possibly develop working drafts of maps for full commission debate. And I want to start by just giving you a little bit of a backdrop, because Monday at midnight was a very important moment in terms of redistricting. California was able to post the revised census data that made the adjustments for the incarcerated population. And looking at the data sets and working with ArcBridge, who is the demographers for the commission, David Ely of Compass Demographics, who's the demographer for the county, the Los Angeles County staff who are working with the software, and ESRI, who's a software provider, there was agreement on some very basic upgrades to the software, as well as some additional databases and clarity to this next iteration of data that will be released. Now, this release will be the official software and database for drawing maps and submitting. That's why this was an important date. We were told apparently in August that the ESRI software would not handle anything other than the blocks and tracks. And so the training was very micro, and the public was dealing with 90,000 units to build these maps. What will be used going forward is a consolidation of these into what are called RDUs, which are about 3,000 units. And they reflect the boundaries of the cities, of the unincorporated areas, and it's a much more manageable number. Those will be rolled up, and you'll be able to look more closely at the cities and the unincorporated areas. So we're hopeful that this will make it easier. The database that will also be overlaid in terms of the ESRI software that will be free to the public is the adjusted population, the voter age population total. We're also going to be using the U.S. Department of Justice categories for the ethnic categories. They're more detailed than what was provided in the August software, which was based on the Office of Management and Budget ethnic categories. The advantage of the Department of Justice is not only is it finer, it separates out if you are one race, two race, what the two races are, and the numbers add up to 100, which makes it much cleaner. It is also the categories that are used if, in fact, there's some litigation in the future. We'll also be providing the unadjusted CVAP by the DOG categories, voter information for 2020 registration total by surname match for categories, and socioeconomic data breakdown, which is something the public has requested. Things such as language spoken at home, renter-owner occupancy, income categories, education categories, and poverty. Now, these, I understand from our demographers, are the requirements that the data sets you need to draw the maps. I am working with David Ely and Preeti Mather to meet with the commission to walk you through this updated software and these data sets. I'd like to propose that we start at 6:30 next week at Bellflower so that they could cover these matters with you, and we would be able to allow the full 2 hours for public testimony starting at 7 o'clock. We are also aiming for either Friday, October 1st or Monday, October 4th to launch the official database. It's a very complex process. The county is working with the vendor, and those seem to be reasonable dates. I will know better on Tuesday precisely which will be the date picked. We also felt it was important to provide additional training in Spanish on how to use the software. And we'd like to have that occur either October 8th or October 11th. I'm working with the Spanish-speaking GIS experts, and in this way, the Spanish-speaking training will be specifically on the official database and software. And one other thing, just to give you a context in terms of the mapping, is they're going to be adding ACS data, block equivalency, so people will know what are all the blocks in the RDU, and providing other election data for those demographers who want to have a more detailed overview. So with that context, what is sort of unknown at this point is how many maps are you going to receive? In 2011, it was around 30 maps. They picked sort of the top 10 maps to look at in greater detail. I mentioned last week the state of Utah had a similar pattern 10 years ago. They got about 30 maps and went through the process. And of course, Utah is smaller than Los Angeles County. When they use this new software, which is online, you can open up your account with a login, create your username and your password. Utah received over 400 maps. So we just do not have any idea of how many maps are available, which is why this ad hoc working group may be beneficial. Now, I submitted a report, and I can put that up on the screen, that sort of outlines some options for you to consider. And as I look at this, here it is. And let me make it big for you. If I do page width, that should work. So this has been posted on our website for your consideration as a commission. And the goal is to really ensure that the commissioners feel that they've had a chance to fully participate in the map-related decisions. To establish a process, though, given your short timeline, that you can make sure the map options are carefully considered. We anticipate most of the maps will be coming in October. You will, by the end of October, come up with what you see as your preferred options. You will then have more public hearings on those options, and they will get refined further. Like if you look at the LA City CRC, I believe they had A, B, C, D, and some others, and 2 nights ago they looked at E, F, G, H, and they're going to be doing more refinements going forward. And you'll have that same iterative process during the month of November as you get more public input. We also want to be sure we ensure transparency and that we help the commission narrow the number of submitted maps to make sure they can look at them in a complete and holistic way. So I want to emphasize that ArcBridge are the ones who will initially review the submitted maps for validity to cover the important points that Co-Chair Williams covered in terms of being contiguous, being equally divided in terms of the number of population and those related criteria. The idea of this ad hoc working group is it would be only advisory. It would review the submitted maps, and they might help group them. So these are all the maps related to the San Fernando Valley, which you've heard a lot of comment about tonight. And these are all the ones that seem to have common thoughts about where to draw the lines along the Mulholland Boulevard, Santa Monica Mountains, Simi Hills, the various demographic areas. They may also come up with a smaller set of maps if others have submitted them, for example, to divide the San Fernando Valley in some way. They would bring those to the full commission then to fully discuss, debate, and get further public input. I also want to emphasize that we are committed that all of the maps that are submitted, both the preliminary maps we've received to date, as well as the ones that come with the official database, will be on a hub and available to the public as well as the commissioners to review. So any commissioner at any time could say, here's a map I think is particularly interesting, let's make sure we look it over. So here are some options for you to think about. Whether or not you want to have an ad hoc working group, and to also think about the size. One of the ad hoc working group on demography was very small, it was about 4. We think this group should be larger, could be as large as 6 or 8 commissioners to make sure we also have the diversity that reflects the community. There's a little table here just to help you to sort of think through the options. One is to expand the charter of the ad hoc working group, which we actually dissolved. So I think given that happened last week, this one should be really a formation of an ad hoc working group on mapping. Expand it to 6 to 8, have them review and share the identified maps to the full commission for consideration. You should think about whether or not you want them to be the ones who help come forward with some options that you would then want to put out for the public hearings. I would see their work ending by the end of the month. Come November, it should then be the charge of the commission to hold those public hearings and to make the adjustments based on public input. The other alternative is you embark on this as a full commission. I think it would take more than one meeting a week. We'd have to have a lot more meetings, and it's really your choice. And then just in final, I want to point out that the commission is the one who makes the recommendations. This group would be only advisory. And again, they would help in terms of the demographer at Arkbridge and LA County CRC staff. So that's the overview, and I can take questions of clarification from the commissioners. We can get public comment, and then see how you might want to proceed.
Thank you, Gayla. So just before we go to the commissioners for their questions, clarifications of you, I just want to mention that these options or these proposals were developed in consultation with the former demography working group, with the co-chair's input as well. And the whole idea is, how do we go from this point where we've now, or we will have soon have gathered all the community of interest input that we're going to get, at least to begin the process. We'll have developed hypotheses, and we're going to start receiving maps, and we're going to presumably want to draw or direct our demographer consultant to help us draw maps. We may receive dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of maps. And how are we going to grapple with that? How are we going to make sense of those maps in order to arrive by the end of the month, basically by the end of October, with maps that we can present to the public as potential maps for public hearing? We saw basically two options. One is at the full commission does this work, grapples with it at every meeting. It's all publicly noticed. We have to have open it up for public comment, et cetera, or have a working group do it. And we thought maybe the demography group could do it, but since it only had 5 members, we thought that wasn't enough members. We wanted to have more buy-in from the commissioners, but there's also a cap there. We can't have 9, because that becomes quorum, and that requires the same kind of thing as a full commission. So those are some considerations, and we definitely want to, maintain transparency. We want to maintain the ability for the public to review everything, and certainly the commissioners to review all the submitted maps, but to have some way of narrowing down the waterfront and grouping things so we could proceed. So what I want to do is, as the chair of this particular item, I'd like to go in a round-robin format and have each commissioner have a turn, and they can certainly pass, but if they have comments, we'll go that way. So I'll ask Ty. I see hands raised, but I'm going to do it this way. So I'll have Ty go ahead and call the next in order on the roll.
Mr. Chairman, so this is 2 round robins, one for clarifying questions and then for comments after public comment?
Correct. So this is just clarifying questions for staff. Then we'll take public comment, if any. Then we'll go back to the commission for their comments.
And Co-Chair Mayet, if I may, I believe we have Holly here to clarify. If you go to 8 members on a working group, I do believe it requires an amendment to your bylaws.
That's right. I forgot about that. So we do have to do that if we choose that option. Thank you.
Commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic and respond when your name is called. Again, this is going to be in a rotating alphabetical order. So we'll start with Commissioner John Venta.
No comment at this moment.
Co-Chair Carolyn Williams.
I just want to reiterate what Co-Chair Maeda said. The concern is the amount of time that we have and how do we manage the data and the issues that we have to. And as we start to consider that, I think it's a little difficult for the whole commission to consider it. But other than that, I don't have any clarifying questions because we've already worked through this in some ways with the working group as well as co-chairs.
Commissioner Dorina Wong.
Yes, I just have one question because I wanted to just clarify perhaps for all the commissioners as to, I believe it's the co-chairs who would decide the membership on the work group, and I just want to confirm that so it's clear for everyone.
I believe that's what the bylaws currently provide, yes.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Jean Franklin.
I have no clarifying questions right now.
Commissioner David Holtzman.
I have 3 clarifying questions, 2 not necessarily for council, but my third will be for council. First question I have is on page 2 of the amended staff report. Near the top, under role and responsibility, it says that the ad hoc working group's role would include being responsible for review of submitted and grouped maps. And I'd like to know what grouped maps means in that context.
So when we spoke to ArcBridge, one of the things they felt would be helpful would be to group maps that were around common themes. So for example, you've heard comments around South Central LA. And so it might be helpful to have those bundled so you could see those maps collectively and you could see how they differ or how they're similar. So that would be the groupings. It would be more around what would be the map options that were drawn for the Santa Clarita Valley and the Antelope Valley or San Gabriel Valley. And how many of them are very, very comparable so you can feel pretty confident there's a large group of people who have submitted maps who sort of feel these are where the boundaries should be, and what might be some maps that are outliers that take a different kind of a viewpoint. We're trying to think of a way to synthesize the information to make it digestible for both the public and for the commissioners to be able to reflect on it.
So you spoke with ArcBridge about this. Is ArcBridge offering to do the grouping? Would they be the ones doing the grouping, or who would be doing the grouping here?
It would be ArcBridge.
It would be ArcBridge.
Working with this ad hoc working group.
Okay, my second question is about the item midway in the page there, shared hub of all map submissions.
Right.
I didn't really see anything in there saying how that's relevant or related to the working group's mandate or constituting a working group. Wouldn't there be a shared hub of all map submissions whether or not there's a working group?
Absolutely. We are committed to having that hub. All maps will be posted. They will be available for the public.
Okay, thank you. And now for council. It's my understanding that the Brown Act prohibits meetings without notice and public access that involve a majority of commissioners, not a quorum of commissioners. So we couldn't have 8 without on a work group, right? Without being subject to the Brown Act, because we have 14 members of the commission. And I believe that's why we set the limit in our bylaws at 6 for an ad hoc working group, because we were expecting that there'd be 6 regular commissioner members and one one of the 2 co-chairs serving ex officio as a member of each of the working groups. So we'd only have 7, not 8. So I wanted to ask council that if we did try and have an ad hoc or some sort of group with 8, just to confirm my understanding that 8 members of a group meeting together would require Brown Act notice and accessibility to the public.
Yeah, this is normally, if we did not have the special legislation that sets a requirement for this body that to pass any official act, it requires an affirmative vote of 9, which is kind of like a mini supermajority. Absolutely, we could not have 8. So this is a little bit of a gray area when you look at the Brown Act that does talk about a majority. And so you're right that way back when we set it at 6, we were doing the most conservative approach. I think there is an argument to be made that since we can't, that the body can't do anything, even with an affirmative vote of 8, that we likely wouldn't violate the Brown Act. But that does it. You're right in recalling the rationale for setting it at 6.
So what's your recommendation?
Well, on that, I think certainly the most conservative thing would be if we had it at 6 or 7. That would be fine. But if it is 7, I do believe we probably would have to amend the bylaws in that regard.
Thank you.
Next, we have Commissioner Mary Kenney.
Yes, I have a clarifying question. Is it anticipated that the discussions of this working group would be recorded, similar to what we're doing with the small groups that are reviewing the comments?
I think that's all up to you to decide. I think the first decision is if you want an ad hoc working group, and then the circumstances under which you want the work done. And it could be done that way if that's what you prefer.
Next, we have Co-Chair Daniel Maeda.
So clarifying question for Holly then. Is it your view that we should not go to 8, a maximum of 8 members of this working group? Would that in fact put us in jeopardy?
Someone might be able to argue that because 8 is a majority of 14, it triggers Brown Act requirements. But so the most conservative approach would be to keep it under 8.
Okay.
Commissioner Mark Mendoza.
This is a well thought out process to move forward. It would seem to me. Is it driven simply by the fact that the volume of maps may be very significant? So, question: would this process go forward irrespective of the number of maps that were actually realized or received?
You could pass an ordinance. You could pass a motion that says if we're only receiving a certain number, we wouldn't do it. What we cannot anticipate is how it's going to grow. So I would assume once the official mapping software is launched, we're going to start getting more maps in week 1, but even more in week 2, week 3 as people proceed to work with it, with the software. So it's hard to know. You know, it could be week 1, you only have a handful, and the working group says, let's take them all forward. It could be in week 2, it doubles in size, still reasonable to take forward to you. But if 200 come in, you may want to have a more thoughtful way of how they're packaged and bundled for you.
Okay, thank you, Gayla. Second question, if there's more people that more commissioners, that have an interest in participating in this working group or expanded working group, then there are slots for them. Is it only going to be the co-chairs that decide who is selected?
That is I'll defer to Holly in terms of the bylaws.
Yes, the commission can establish the ad hoc working group, but the co-chairs under the bylaws are the ones that appoint members to the working group.
Thank you.
And I would encourage any commissioners who want to be involved to obviously let the co-chairs know of that interest. And I would assume that the people who worked in the ad hoc working group in demography have a strong background, and I would think there would be a lot of interest for their continuation. So this allows for more people to be added to basically that think tank.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Apollonia Morales.
Thank you. Just a question, just in terms of it kind of goes similar to what was asked or what was stated by Gayla, just in terms of it's volunteer, or are we nominating, or is there a criteria also in terms of representation? transparency and making sure, you know, we're able to have those robust conversations.
I mean, I think those are all considerations, and I know the smaller ad hoc working group on demography did not have the ethnic diversity that reflects the full commission as well as the full county. That was the other reason why we felt it should be larger. And again, I would think the co-chairs would welcome people who would want to be on it. I'll defer to the co-chairs if they want to talk about a process and how people might be appointed or make it known. For now, I think the question is first, do you even want such a work group?
Commissioner Nelson Obregon.
I think my only real question is as a committee, are we ever gonna actually be able to speak to see if we can come up with a consensus or an approach to dividing the county into 5 parts, and to see if we have a common look on what could be fair, and then we can go from there to try to balance the populations, because I think that's going to be our a point there, that we need to balance the populations, but we also need to try to be geographically contiguous, and also with the communities of interest. Are we ever going to be able to see an approach before we try to divvy up the work into areas?
So, Commissioner Obregon, you have raised the major question that is facing the entire commission. And that is, right now, I really feel it's important that you think about what that approach will be. It does require people rolling up their sleeves, looking at the community of interest input, looking at what areas that they want to keep together, and start looking at the maps that come in and see which ones are consistent with your understanding, what you want to put forth, what you want to debate, what the full commission then really wants to develop in terms of the 5 district options. So that's the work before you.
And what I'm saying is shouldn't we as a commission approach that and see if we can create a vision of what we think could be right?
Absolutely. And once the official database is available in early October, you now then have the official ability, according to the Senate bill, to be able to start drawing lines. And the point of looking at maps submitted is to give you ideas of maps that are coming from the public. But by all means, you all can also draw maps. You can share your maps. You can talk about the maps. This is where the core work faces you all. This is why you serve on this commission. I feel like I'm not answering your question, Commissioner Obregon. Just by your facial expression.
No, I'm still trying to understand when we as a commission are going to come up with a plan.
Yes,
and of course, whatever plan we come up with, we know it's going to need to be fixed. But we as a commission need to have some sort of a vision, and then let the public tell us where we could be wrong, and then come up with a fix if it's needed. If not, but I still think we as a commission need to come together, all 14 of us,
right,
and create some sort of a vision and let the public see it, and then we change it if needed.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, I like your term vision, because at the end of October, the 14 commissioners have to agree, these are our vision. These are our options that we think are worthy of consideration. You are going to have, let's say, 3, 4, 5 options that you're going to present to the public by the end of October. And the month of November, you're going to have people react to it, and you're going to refine it further. And by the end of, by December 15th, you're going to have to pick the best one, the one you want, the vision that you want to put forth as a final one. Okay?
We next have Commissioner Priscilla Urbanella Segura.
I have no clarifying questions at this time.
Next is Commissioner Hyla Soto.
Yes, thank you. I just have one clarifying question. Maybe if we could remind the public who's part of the demography working group ad hoc, just for transparency. We keep mentioning 5 members, but anyone that hasn't followed our meetings as closely might not be familiar who's participated in the process. Thank you.
So I didn't hear exactly a question. I thought you were making an observation.
The working group on demography, it consisted of Commissioner Vento, Commissioner Holtzman, Commissioner Wong, Commissioner Stetcher, and
that was it.
That was it.
Oh, at Obregon.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson.
Commissioner Holtzman here. I'll point out I did not participate in the development of this proposal.
Ty, who's next?
Who is next?
Next we have Commissioner Cyrus Soto.
Thank you. So based on who has been on the, who was on the demography working group, are we then, is that what we're building from, or because that was dismantled? I don't know if that's the proper term in this case, but are we in essence starting from scratch and we have all 6 or 7 slots now open for appointment?
So I would defer to the 2 co-chairs. I think there was a strong feeling that the ad hoc working group in charge of demography had completed their mission. You had a demographer. So this is an opportunity to look at it with fresh eyes. Do either of the co-chairs want to comment further on that?
My only comment would be I would like to hear from each commissioner, those who were on the demography working group, if they would like to be on the mapping working group, yes or no. And then I would also like to hear if any other commissioners not on that prior working group want to be considered to be on the mapping one. Please let us, Carolyn and I, know. I will mention, though, that it is a very significant amount of work that's going to be required in the next month for this working group. So don't volunteer unless you're prepared to do a very significant amount of work, because I anticipate that there will be many, many maps and certainly map ideas emanating from the COI hypotheses that we'll have to grapple with. So there's just a little warning, but please do let us know your input as to whether you want to serve or not.
And I'd just like to add that it's important that this working group reflect the diversity of the commission as we move forward and have these important discussions and considerations. So that's something else that we're looking for in this working group. It looks like the county and looks like us as a commission.
Let me also just mention, I'm watching the clock because we have to leave the public library at 9 o'clock. I want to make sure we finish this round robin of questions of clarification. We do have one public comment on this topic. I've received a speaker card. So if we could proceed, we have about 12 minutes. And obviously this will have to be an item we'll have to continue.
So next we have Commissioner Brian Stetcher.
I have one clarifying or confusing observation, and that is we haven't set a deadline for the public to submit maps. And the process is continuous. So even this working group spends a lot of time the first 2 or 3 weeks of October coming up with presentation for the full commission. There may still be maps that come in after that point that the commission will have to consider along with the subset identified by the working group. So we will not actually be able to process everything. The working group will not be able to process everything. It's going to be a clumsy accumulation of maps towards the end of the month.
That is correct. We decided as part of an open process that you'll take community of interest input throughout the entire process. Frankly, if somebody wanted to submit a map on December 14th and you're voting the next day, you'd have that map submission made, but you may have to decide, you know, it's pretty limited. But we had decided not to put deadlines. Now, we have posted that we would like community of interest input by September 30th for that very purpose. It's not a hard deadline. We're just encouraging the public to get it in because you're going to be moving on to mapping.
But I think Commissioner Sinatra was talking about map submission deadline.
Right, and we could do, what I was going to say was we're going to do a similar thing where we could have a suggested deadline to please try to get your maps into us by the end of October so we can fully consider them. But you're going to continue getting maps through November, particularly, I think, in response to what you come up with as options. People will have counter map options, and that's just the reality.
That concludes the round robin of clarifying questions.
Okay. So there's one public comment I have from Cindy Montanez. And I believe, Co-Chair, this is the 2-minute duration again?
Yes.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. My name is Cindy Montañez, and I'm actually a city council member here in the city of San Fernando, but I'm here just to speak as a resident. So welcome to the city of San Fernando. We're really glad that the commission is holding a meeting here. And I just wanted to speak on behalf of the Valley, as a Valley resident, born and raised here in the San Fernando Valley. The importance for the Valley to actually get a supervisorial seat that is fully contained, have the Valley stay together, to have a Valley supervisorial seat, I think is really important. We have 1.8 million people, as you know, that live in the Valley. And even for Latinos, you know, we end up being about 41% of the population in the San Fernando Valley. So I think it is possible to have a seat in the San Fernando Valley that does give a fair shot at a diverse population being able to get elected. Clearly, there'd probably be some other population that would have to be added to a Valley seat. And I think that's where, you know, we just encourage the commission to look at communities that would be similar to our Valley communities. So independent cities like the city of San Fernando do tend to have things in common which don't really stand out with our other Valley independent cities that tend to be smaller. You know, city manager or city administrator form of governments, and so we work very closely with our board of supervisors, and I really do think that it's time that the Valley get its own supervisorial seat, because we are a pretty significant, not just cultural engine, but economic engine, and education base. I mean, the economy, obviously, the businesses here are really strong. So I just I speak here just on behalf of the Valley and encourage you to take that into consideration, and I think do something that would be very historic and I think really enhance LA County as a whole, and bring communities that are similar together. So thank you again for the incredible work that you are doing. It's exciting to be at this place now. We again stand here to be of any assistance if I can.
Chair, may I follow up?
Very, very brief one, please.
Assembly Member Montañez, I want to thank you, first of all, for coming to one of our meetings. It's quite an honor. I'm a fan of tree people, and it's great to see someone that's leading tree people now. I'm wondering if tree people or you might be able to provide us with some sort of mapping or graphical exposition of areas of LA County or the Valley here that really need more tree cover. And I know that the need for tree cover is correlated now. I've seen a recent article with formerly being redlined, areas that were formerly redlined need tree cover better. It's basically an environmental justice problem. Yes. So I think maybe if we could use tree cover perhaps in our mapping, that would be useful as a proxy for communities that have similar interests. So I don't know, if you do have anything like that, it would be great if you could submit it.
Absolutely, that's an excellent question, and truly amazing that the question is being asked about equity and tree canopy coverage. We do have LIDAR, so LIDAR is just a high level, an aerial assessment through the highest sophisticated ability to do this, to do an analysis of tree canopy coverage. We have that for the entire county of Los Angeles. So we would provide that. The county actually has that information since we did the LIDAR tree canopy cover assessment, and that will exactly show those points on equity and communities that have low tree canopy coverage, and communities that have historically been redlined. So that the other commissioners know, I am also a CEO of Tree People, but I'm speaking here obviously just as a Valley resident. But I would be very happy, Tree People would be very happy to provide that information to the commission. And thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
It's a very important issue.
Ty, do we have any public comment on this particular agenda item?
We currently do not.
Okay. So it is, we have 10 minutes. Should we begin additional questions from the commission, additional comments from the commission?
I see Commissioner Stetcher's hand up.
I didn't quite finish. I had a second clarifying question, and that was how the work of this subcommittee, working group, would coordinate with the effort to merge the COI maps that we're doing in small groups. I didn't understand exactly how those two tracks would come together.
Yeah, so the COI, you as a full commission are going to be reviewing those hypotheses on October 6th. So that's very early in the process. So all 14 commissioners will have that information. And it's something you should keep in mind when you develop them. If a submitted map, violates, for example, how East LA, you all have heard from the public, needs to be handled, and a submitted map maybe splits it, and the majority of your comments have been, please keep Southeast LA together, that may be a criteria then to sort of say, this map's not high on our list. Just as an example.
And I could say, it may be that at the meeting in which we discuss the COI hypotheses, the commission will come to a consensus that we would like ArcBridge to begin preparing maps that follow these particular hypotheses that the full commission has decided, have merit, and we would like to see maps that are pursuing some of those hypotheses. Not sure quite what that meeting is going to be like, but that's certainly a possibility.
With that, I'm watching the clock. It's 5 of, so I'm not sure we have really the time, co-chairs, to do a discussion among the commissioners. I would suggest we continue this item on another agenda item so we respect the restrictions of this facility.
I agree. Ty, is there anybody who has come in who would like to make public comment on the communities of interest for the public hearing?
Currently not.
Okay. I'll indicate that the public hearing is now closed. Is there anything further now before we adjourn? I will just mention that I again reiterate that if the commissioners, whether you previously were on the demography working group or not, if you were interested in participating in the proposed new ad hoc mapping working group, please let Carolyn and I know, Co-Chair Williams and I know, and we promise to obviously seriously consider your candidacies. I see that there's a couple hands raised, but we only have a couple minutes, so make them quick, okay?
So we have Commissioner Mendoza, then Commissioner Franklin.
Yes. Did we hear from all the commissioners regarding questions, clarifying questions? I don't think we did we?
Yes, we did.
Went through all 14? Okay, excuse me.
Commissioner Franklin?
Will we not vote on whether we would like to have this ad hoc group opposed to having all 14 commissioners do the work? Will we vote on that?
We may vote on that if there's a motion. The suggestion is that we are in a building that closes down in a few minutes. There's a lot of equipment that needs to be packed. So we're not really going to be able to productively have a motion and discussion in time to be able to vote tonight. So this will just have to be postponed until next Wednesday.
Right, because you are asking for commissioners who would like to serve on the ad hoc. You're assuming that the ad hoc committee, we will go forth on that and not have all 14 commissioners do the work.
It is still possible that the commission will vote to not have an ad hoc working group, in which case that would be moot, but I still think it'd be good to find out who's interested.
Commissioner Obregon, you have your hand up?
Yeah, like Commissioner Franklin suggested, I think we are at a point that we can have the 14 commissioners, you know, discuss approach before we create an ad hoc group to create an approach. I'm not sure what the ad hoc group is going to do that we as 14 commissioners can't do. That's my comment, I guess.
Okay, is there any other comments, as we're not going to have a motion tonight, or any other comments, the last comments before we adjourn for the evening? Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. We'll see you next week at, is it 6:30?
We'll start at 6:30.
6:30 on next Wednesday.
And the adjournment time is 9:57 p.m. I'm sorry, 8:57 p.m.
And we adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
all.
Good night.
Good night.